April 15th, 1945, 11:43 hours. Kakazu Ridge, central Okinawa. Private Kenji Sato was sitting in his bunker as the earth began to shake with rhythmic tremors. Through the narrow firing slit, he could see American B-24 Liberators approaching in perfect formation, their bomb bay doors already open like the mouths of mechanical dragons preparing to breathe fire. The sound reached him first, a whistle that started high and descended into a shriek that seemed to tear the air itself. Then came the impact. The 2,000-pound general-purpose bomb struck Kakazu Ridge with the force of a concentrated earthquake, sending shock waves through solid rock that made the mountain itself seem to convulse in agony. When the dust cleared, the bunker complex that had housed 37 men simply no longer existed. Where reinforced concrete and limestone had once provided absolute protection, there was now only a smoking crater 60 feet wide and 30 feet deep. The fortress that Japanese engineers had spent months creating had been erased in less than 3 seconds. For Japanese defenders on Okinawa, the terror came not from marine rifles or naval shells, but from bombs so massive they could delete mountains. Weapons that made courage irrelevant and turned the strongest fortifications into mass graves for the men who had trusted them for protection. The Fortress Island. Okinawa had been transformed over 8 months into what Japanese military planners considered the most formidable defensive position in Pacific history. The island's natural limestone geography provided cave systems that engineers expanded into underground cities capable of housing entire divisions with their equipment, supplies, and command facilities. The defensive plan relied on 3 successive lines of fortification that took advantage of Okinawa's terrain to create killing fields where American forces would be forced into frontal assaults against prepared positions. Each line had been designed to inflict maximum casualties while preserving Japanese forces for prolonged resistance that would make the invasion so costly that America would negotiate rather than continue toward the home islands. General Mitsuru Ushijima commanded over 120,000 troops who had spent the winter of 1944 to 1945 digging bunkers, reinforcing caves, and preparing defensive positions that incorporated every lesson learned from previous Pacific battles. The fortifications were designed to withstand direct hits from battleship guns and resist penetration by conventional American weapons. The Shuri line, centerpiece of the defensive system, stretched across Okinawa's narrow waist and included positions that had been blasted from solid rock, reinforced with concrete and steel, and connected by tunnel systems that allowed movement without surface exposure. Japanese planners believed these fortifications were impregnable to anything Americans could deploy against them. The mathematics of annihilation. American planning for Okinawa recognized that conventional weapons would be inadequate against the sophisticated defensive positions Japanese forces had prepared. The solution required scaling up explosive power to levels that could destroy entire hill complexes rather than individual bunkers or fighting positions. The 2,000-pound general-purpose bomb contained 975 pounds of Composition B explosive that detonated with force equivalent to approximately 1,400 pounds of TNT. The weapon was designed to penetrate hardened targets before exploding, creating blast effects that could collapse underground structures and cave systems that smaller bombs couldn't damage. American ordnance experts calculated that direct hits from 2,000-pound bombs could destroy reinforced concrete bunkers up to 12 feet thick, while near misses created shock waves that collapsed cave systems and buried defenders alive under tons of rubble. The weapons transformed terrain itself into a weapon against troops who had relied on geography for protection. The bombing campaign against Okinawa would eventually deliver over 41,000 tons of explosives to an island smaller than Los Angeles County. This concentration of destructive force exceeded anything previously applied to such a limited area, creating conditions where Japanese defenders faced systematic obliteration rather than conventional military defeat. The sound of doom. The psychological impact of two 000-pound bombs began long before the explosions reached their targets. The characteristic whistle of falling bombs created terror that paralyzed defenders, who learned to associate the sound with imminent annihilation that no amount of preparation could prevent. The descending tone started as a barely audible whine that gradually increased in volume and pitch, until it became a shriek that seemed to fill the entire world. Experienced soldiers learned to estimate impact points and timing from the sound, but knowledge only increased terror because they understood exactly when death was approaching. Corporal Hiroshi Tanaka had survived bombing attacks throughout the Pacific War, but the Okinawa campaign introduced sounds that exceeded his previous experience. The small bombs whistled like arrows. The big bombs screamed like demons falling from heaven. When you heard that scream, you knew the mountain was about to die. The psychological conditioning was systematic and cumulative. Defenders learned that the characteristic sound meant death was approaching with mathematical precision, while the silence that followed meant either survival for another few minutes or the eternal silence of burial under collapsed rock. The engineering of destruction. American ordnance engineers had designed the two 000-pound general-purpose bomb specifically for attacking hardened targets that resisted smaller weapons. The weapon's aerodynamic shape allowed accurate delivery from high altitudes, while its delayed action fuse ensured penetration before detonation for maximum structural damage. The bomb's steel casing was engineered to survive impact with concrete or rock before the internal fuse triggered detonation. This penetration capability meant that even deeply buried positions weren't safe from weapons that could punch through overhead protection before exploding inside defensive positions. The blast effects created by two 000-pound bombs exceeded the structural limits of any fortification that Japanese engineering could construct. The combination of overpressure, ground shock, and thermal effects created destruction zones where human survival was impossible regardless of cover or protection. Quality control in American bomb manufacturing ensured reliability that made defensive planning impossible. Japanese engineers couldn't design fortifications to withstand weapons whose effectiveness was guaranteed by industrial precision that eliminated the variables traditional fortification design had exploited. The Kakazu demonstration. The destruction of Kakazu Ridge on April 15th provided Japanese defenders with their first comprehensive demonstration of American bombing capabilities applied to fortified positions. The ridge had been considered the strongest point in the outer defensive line, with positions that had been blasted from solid limestone and reinforced beyond anything previously attempted. The bombing attack began at 11:40 hours with a formation of 18 B-24 Liberators approaching from the southwest at 18,000 feet altitude. Each aircraft carried four 2 000-pound bombs, delivering 144,000 pounds of explosives to a target area less than 800 meters long and 400 meters wide. The bombardment lasted exactly 17 minutes, during which 72 2 000-pound bombs struck Kakazu Ridge in a pattern that systematically destroyed every defensive position, command post, and supply depot that Japanese engineers had spent 5 months creating. Lieutenant Yoshiaki Minami commanded the 3rd Company, defending the ridge's eastern slope. His position included 3 reinforced bunkers connected by tunnels that provided protected movement and mutual support. The company had survived previous bombing attacks and artillery barrages that had failed to seriously damage their fortifications. The first bomb hit the western bunker, Minami recalled in testimony given after his capture. The explosion was like nothing we had experienced. The rock walls cracked, dust filled the tunnels, and we could hear our comrades screaming from the collapsed sections. Then more bombs fell, each one worse than the last. The Shuri obliteration. The systematic destruction of the Shuri defensive line in May 1945 demonstrated American bombing capabilities against the most sophisticated fortifications Japanese engineering had ever attempted. The complex included underground command centers, supply depots, hospitals, and living quarters that had been carved from solid limestone and reinforced with concrete and steel. The bombing campaign against Shuri began on May 4th with coordinated attacks by Army Air Force's B-29 superfortresses and Navy carrier aircraft that delivered over 650 tons of bombs in a single day. The attack pattern was designed to systematically destroy the defensive complex from north to south, eliminating positions in sequence to prevent mutual support. Each wave of bombers carried different weapons optimized for specific targets. Armor-piercing bombs attacked reinforced positions, while general-purpose bombs destroyed supply areas and personnel shelters. Fragmentation bombs killed exposed defenders, while delayed action bombs prevented repair efforts by exploding hours or days after initial attacks. The psychological impact on defenders was immediate and devastating. Men who had considered their positions impregnable watched entire hill complexes disappear under bombardment that exceeded their comprehension. The systematic nature of the destruction made clear that American forces possessed resources unlimited by any constraints Japanese defenders understood. The underground nightmare. Japanese troops who survived initial bombing attacks often found themselves trapped in collapsed tunnel systems where rescue was impossible and slow death by suffocation or starvation became inevitable. The cave networks that had seemed to provide ultimate protection became underground tombs where men died slowly in darkness. The geological effects of massive explosions created conditions that Japanese military engineering had never anticipated. Shock waves transmitted through solid rock collapsed tunnel systems far from direct impact points, while blast overpressure traveled through cave networks and killed defenders who thought they were safely buried. Staff Sergeant Mamoru Fujita supervised construction of the tunnel complex beneath Hill 89, a position that included living quarters for 200 men, ammunition storage, a field hospital, and command facilities that Japanese planners considered absolutely secure from any weapon Americans possessed. "We dug for 4 months," Fujita testified after the war. 20 feet of solid rock above our heads, steel doors, concrete reinforcement. When the big bombs came, the mountain moved like an earthquake. Tunnels collapsed. Men were buried alive. And those who survived couldn't dig out because the entrances were blocked by tons of rubble. The trapped defenders faced choices between suffocation in collapsed tunnels or attempting to dig out through tons of debris while American bombing continued above ground. Many chose to remain underground and die slowly rather than risk exposure to weapons that made surface survival impossible. The pilot's perspective. American aircrew who delivered 2 000-pound bombs to Okinawan targets observed destruction that exceeded anything they had witnessed during previous Pacific campaigns. The weapons they carried could erase entire military installations and transform landscape features that had existed for millions of years. Captain Robert Mitchell flew B-25 Mitchell bombers from Ieshima Airfield, conducting close air support missions that delivered 2 000-pound bombs to targets identified by forward observers working with advancing Marine units. His squadron flew multiple missions daily, attacking positions that continued to resist after preliminary bombardments. "You could see the results immediately," Mitchell recalled decades later. A hilltop would be there when you approached, and gone when you looked back after dropping. Not damaged, gone. The whole ridge would just disappear under the smoke and dust. It was like watching geology in reverse. The bomber crews understood that their weapons were creating more than tactical destruction. They were systematically eliminating Japanese defensive capability through firepower that made traditional military resistance impossible. Each successful attack proved that American industrial capacity could overwhelm any defensive preparation. The naval coordination. The bombing campaign against Okinawa was coordinated with naval gunfire that delivered additional thousands of tons of explosives to targets that air attacks couldn't effectively engage. The combination of aerial bombing and naval bombardment created destruction that exceeded the sum of individual attacks. The USS Iowa and USS Missouri, positioned offshore, fired 16-inch shells weighing 2,700 pounds each at targets that had survived bombing attacks or appeared too heavily fortified for aircraft weapons. The naval guns could deliver precise fire that complemented aerial bombardment by attacking specific point targets. Fire control radar allowed naval guns to engage targets with accuracy that approached that of bombing attacks, while the trajectory of naval shells allowed them to reach positions that were protected from aerial bombing by overhead cover or geographic features. The psychological impact of coordinated bombing and naval gunfire was cumulative and overwhelming. Japanese defenders faced attacks that could come from any direction at any time, delivered by weapons that could destroy any fortification or protection they might create. The industrial precision. American bomb manufacturing operated with industrial precision that guaranteed weapon reliability and effectiveness that Japanese defenders learned to fear more than random destruction. The systematic quality control meant that every 2,000-pound bomb would perform exactly as designed, eliminating uncertainty that traditional defensive planning had relied upon. Production statistics revealed the scale of American commitment to destroying Japanese defensive positions through overwhelming firepower. American factories produced over 5.4 million bombs weighing 500 pounds or more during 1945, with significant percentages of these weapons destined for use against Japanese fortifications. The precision manufacturing extended to fusing systems that controlled detonation timing for maximum effectiveness against specific target types. Delayed action fuses allowed penetration of hardened targets, while instantaneous fuses maximized blast effects against personnel and equipment in the open. Japanese intelligence officers who analyzed captured American ordnance consistently reported manufacturing quality that exceeded Japanese standards and suggested industrial capacity that could sustain bombing campaigns indefinitely. The technical evidence contradicted propaganda claims about American weakness and confirmed the hopelessness of continued resistance. The communication breakdown. The destruction of Japanese communication systems by systematic bombing isolated defensive units and prevented coordinated resistance that might have been more effective against American attacks. Command posts, radio stations, and telephone lines were priority targets that bombers attacked repeatedly. The psychological isolation created by communication breakdown often proved more devastating than physical destruction. Units that lost contact with higher headquarters faced decisions about continued resistance without information about overall strategic situations or possibilities for reinforcement and supply. Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, senior staff officer for the 32nd Army, described the communication crisis. Each bombing attack destroyed more of our command structure. Units fought bravely but independently, without coordination or mutual support. We became an army of isolated fragments rather than a unified force. The breakdown of command and control systems meant that Japanese forces couldn't adapt their defensive tactics to counter American bombing effectiveness. Units continued using fortification techniques that had proven vulnerable, while successful defensive innovations couldn't be communicated to other positions. The civilian terror. Okinawan civilians who witnessed the bombing attacks experienced terror that exceeded anything they had imagined possible. The systematic destruction of military positions demonstrated American power that seemed unlimited by any constraints of geography, engineering, or military science. Many civilian families had taken shelter in caves near military positions, believing that proximity to Japanese troops would provide protection from American attacks. The bombing campaign proved that nearness to military targets made civilian shelters more dangerous rather than safer. The sound of approaching bombers created panic among civilian populations who had learned to associate aircraft engines with imminent death. Children developed psychological trauma from repeated exposure to bombing attacks that seemed to threaten the existence of the world itself. Mrs. Kinuko Higa sheltered with her family in caves near Shuri during the May bombing campaign. The sound would start far away, then grow until it filled everything. When the bombs fell, the earth would jump like a living thing. We knew that if the bombs found us, there would be nothing left. Not bodies to bury, not memories to keep, nothing. The medical catastrophe. Japanese medical personnel attempting to treat bombing casualties discovered that conventional medical techniques were inadequate for injuries caused by 2,000-pound bombs. The weapons created types of trauma that exceeded existing medical knowledge and available treatment capabilities. The blast effects produced injuries that combined massive trauma with thermal burns, while the psychological impact created shock that often proved fatal even when physical injuries weren't immediately life-threatening. Medical supplies were inadequate for treating large numbers of severely injured personnel simultaneously. Dr. Shigeru Suzuki operated a field hospital in caves beneath Shuri Castle until bombing attacks made medical work impossible. The bombs created injuries we had never seen. Men buried under collapsed rock, others burned by blast heat, many who seemed unhurt but died from shock. We had no medicines, no equipment, no hope of saving most of the wounded. The medical crisis was compounded by the destruction of medical facilities, killing of medical personnel, and disruption of supply lines that prevented delivery of medicines and equipment. Japanese medical capabilities collapsed under the systematic destruction that bombing campaigns created. The strategic recognition. Japanese military leaders recognized that the bombing campaign represented strategic capabilities that made continued resistance militarily meaningless. The systematic destruction of defensive positions proved that American industrial capacity could overcome any defensive preparations Japan might attempt. General Ushijima acknowledged in his final messages to Tokyo that Okinawan resistance was failing not because of tactical errors or insufficient courage, but because American firepower made defense impossible. The bombing attacks had rendered traditional military planning obsolete. Intelligence estimates suggested that American bombing capabilities observed on Okinawa could be applied to any Japanese position, including the home islands themselves. The demonstration of American power implied that continued resistance would only increase Japanese casualties without affecting the war's eventual outcome. The strategic implications extended beyond immediate military considerations to questions about Japanese national survival. If American bombs could erase mountains on Okinawa, what would happen to Japanese cities and civilian populations during an invasion of the home islands? The psychological collapse. The cumulative psychological impact of 2,000-pound bombs created widespread breakdown among Japanese defenders who had been prepared to die fighting, but not prepared to be systematically buried alive. The weapons challenged fundamental assumptions about military honor and meaningful resistance. Men who had trained for hand-to-hand combat found themselves facing weapons that killed without allowing any possibility of retaliation or honorable death in battle. The bombs reduced brave soldiers to helpless victims who died without opportunity to demonstrate courage or loyalty. Sergeant Isamu Cho described the psychological transformation. "We came to Okinawa ready to die for the Emperor. But the bombs didn't give us glorious death in battle. They gave us terror, suffocation, and burial under rock. Many men broke under the strain and begged to surrender rather than face more bombing. The breakdown of military discipline accelerated as bombing attacks continued. Units that had maintained perfect order during conventional combat began showing signs of panic and desertion when faced with weapons that made resistance seem pointless. The technical evolution. American bomb targeting became increasingly sophisticated as the Okinawa campaign progressed, with intelligence analysis identifying the most effective weapons and tactics for destroying specific types of Japanese fortifications. The learning process improved bombing effectiveness through systematic application of scientific analysis. Photo reconnaissance revealed the results of bombing attacks and allowed assessment of weapon effectiveness against different target types. This intelligence-guided selection of weapons and attack patterns that maximized destruction of Japanese defensive positions. Forward air controllers working with ground units provided real-time targeting information that allowed bombers to attack positions that were actively resisting American advances. The coordination between air and ground forces made bombing attacks more tactically relevant and psychologically devastating. The technical improvements in bombing accuracy and effectiveness meant that Japanese defensive positions faced increasingly lethal attacks as the campaign progressed. Each day brought more sophisticated threats that exceeded anything defenders had prepared to counter. The final bombardment. The final phase of the Okinawa campaign featured bombing attacks that exceeded all previous scales of destruction, with American forces applying overwhelming firepower to eliminate remaining Japanese resistance before declaring the island secure. The bombardments created apocalyptic scenes that survivors described as the end of the world. On June 18, 1945, coordinated bombing attacks delivered over 800 tons of explosives to the remaining Japanese positions in southern Okinawa. The attacks included 2 0.000-pound bombs, napalm, and white phosphorus that created fires visible from ships 50 miles offshore. The final bombardments were designed not just to destroy remaining military resistance, but to demonstrate American power in terms that would influence Japanese decisions about continued fighting. The systematic obliteration of Okinawan defenses provided preview of what invasion of the home islands would mean. Japanese survivors of the final bombings described destruction that transcended military conflict and approached geological catastrophe. The attacks transformed Okinawa's landscape permanently, creating craters and debris fields that remained visible decades after the war ended. The survivor testimony. Japanese soldiers who survived the bombing campaign provided testimony that documented both the physical destruction and psychological impact of weapons that exceeded all previous experience of warfare. Their accounts influenced post-war understanding of strategic bombing effects on military personnel and civilian populations. The survivors consistently emphasized the helplessness they felt when facing weapons that made courage irrelevant and resistance meaningless. The 2 0.000-pound bombs created terror that transcended normal military fear and approached existential dread about human survival in mechanized warfare. Medical examinations of bombing survivors revealed physical and psychological trauma that required specialized treatment not available during wartime. Many survivors suffered from conditions that would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder caused by exposure to weapons that exceeded human capacity to process psychologically. The end of fortification. The destruction of Okinawan fortifications by bombing attacks marked the end of defensive engineering as a reliable protection against modern weapons. The demonstration that any fortification could be destroyed by sufficient application of explosive force changed military architecture permanently. Post-war defensive planning emphasized mobility and dispersal rather than fixed fortifications that bombing had proven vulnerable to systematic destruction. The lessons from Okinawa influenced military engineering that prioritized survival through movement rather than protection through construction. The psychological impact of fortification failure extended beyond military planning to civilian defense concepts that recognized the impossibility of protecting populations against modern weapons through passive defense measures. The ultimate terror. In the end, the 2,000-pound bombs dropped on Okinawa represented more than tactical weapons. They were harbingers of warfare that transcended human scale and approached forces of nature in their destructive power. For Japanese defenders who experienced them, the bombs proved that industrial civilization could create weapons that made traditional military virtues obsolete. The terror these weapons created wasn't just fear of death, but recognition that modern warfare had evolved beyond human comprehension or control. Men who had prepared to die bravely in battle found themselves facing weapons that reduced human courage to irrelevance and transformed soldiers into helpless victims of forces beyond their ability to resist or understand. The survivors who emerged from collapsed caves and destroyed bunkers carried memories of destruction that exceeded their capacity to describe. They had witnessed the birth of warfare that treated human beings as targets for industrial processes rather than opponents in human conflict, previewing a future where courage, honor, and determination would matter less than the mathematical precision of mass-produced destruction. For the Japanese who lived through the bombing of Okinawa, the 2,000-pound bombs became symbols of American power that transcended military capability and approached the forces that shaped geology itself. They had faced weapons that could delete mountains, and in doing so, they had glimpsed the future of human conflict, a future where victory belonged not to the brave, but to those who could produce the most devastating instruments of systematic obliteration.